Good morning. Welcome to Unity Longmont Spiritual Center on the 4th of August, 2024. We are so blessed to have Christina Hildebrandt providing music with her harp, Hester. I'm Dava Money, and I will be speaking about our relationship with God this morning. Thank you, Christina. Wow, a bit of heaven. That was beautiful, Christina. Thank you, as always. Let's go into prayer together by taking a breath, being aware of our bodies, our minds, our hearts. Beloved presence, we join today in relationships that are so precious to us, to know each other, to belong together. We're open today to exploring our relationship with all that is. And as always, we're open to experiencing and expressing gratitude. And so it is. Amen. We'll hear from Christina again.
See what happens when I play in the relationship I have with my harp, which is ever changing.
Again, another wow. Thank you, Christina and Hester. Beautiful. So, as always, please take what serves you and leave the rest. I've been thinking recently about relationships and especially relationship with God or all that is. So, as I'm talking, if the word God doesn't work for you, please substitute what does work. I know my own definition of God has evolved over time and is probably still evolving. And so I pulled out a little piece by Mary Oliver, who can say things so much better than I. I don't know who God is exactly, but I'll tell you this. I was sitting in the river named Clarion on a water splashed stone, and all afternoon I listened to the voices of the river talking. Whenever the water struck a stone, it had something to say. And the water itself, and even the mosses trailing under the water. And slowly, very slowly, it became clear to me what they were saying. Said the river, I am part of holiness. I am part of holiness. And I too, said the stone, and I too, whispered the moss beneath the water. So this morning, I invite you to consider your relationship with all that is. And the first question might be, are we each part of the holiness? And if we're part of the holiness, what does that mean to each of us? I invite you to remember, how did you meet this source, this benevolent source, this God? How did you meet? When you did meet, did you realize how precious that meeting was? And how has your perception of God changed as you've changed and grown? And how might it continue to change? Another question, what does God provide for you? What kind of provisions are there from God for you? Another question, and what do you offer God? Because aren't we in relationship? Aren't we in relationship with so much of life? And does it serve us to pause periodically and just look at that? Maybe with wonder and gratitude, appreciation for that which is. A lot of folks think of God in an anthropomorphic way, like God is a being separate from, and that they use pronouns like he, she, mother, father, God, words like that are human-like. And to me, that says something about their intimate relationship with God. And for others, there's a non-anthropomorphic God is just ineffable and hard to find language to express what it is and how we experience it. It's just too large for a pronoun, probably too large for the word God. So one of the things I was looking at in figuring out relationship to God is I'm looking at other faiths, just reviewing today, if we have time, Buddhism and Hinduism, looking at how people who might belong to another community or another faith, what relationship they might have, and are there similarities? One of the things I've always liked about unity is you are welcome to be with us regardless of your beliefs. The other thing that I appreciate is that we often will explore the beliefs, the religions of the world to see what's similar, to see what's different, to see what might fit us as we continue to grow and evolve. So, one of the things that most faiths have in common is recognizing in our relationship with all that is, we are looking for meaning. What does meaning mean to you? Are we looking for meaning for ourselves, for meaning for ourselves in life, for meaning about why there is life, why there is so much more than we're even aware of? What is the meaning? And over our years, has that meaning changed? One of the ways we look at meaning is, what do I do? What do I do for a living? What do I do passionately? What I am drawn to? And what does that say about me? What does that mean about us? Gandhi said, I claim to be a passionate seeker after truth, which is but another name for God. So the meaning that Gandhi found was truth. And we know from his history, from his life, he used that truth to make a huge difference in his own life, in the life of his country, and the life of our world. One of the things about Buddhism is that it promotes enlightenment. Think about the word enlightenment. A lot of faiths talk about light. Don't hide your lamp under a bushel. Light. What does light mean? Are we of light? Christian faith often talks about a spiritual rebirth, like Saul being stopped on the road to Damascus and having such an intense experience of relationship with God that he changed his name to Paul. How many of us have had that moment? I know a lot of us have had kind of an opposite moment of despair, of losing faith in something, losing faith perhaps in ourselves, maybe hitting some kind of rock bottom, and then finding relationship there. Relationship with ourselves, relationship with all that is. I don't think there's any wrong or right way to come to this relationship. I don't think there's any wrong or right way to describe or experience the relationship. I do think it's of great value to have it. So, enlightenment is a mysterious path. I can't look at you and say, oh, you are enlightened. I can tell. I'm not even sure I can say, oh, I'm enlightened. I think I can say sometimes, that was enlightening. Some experience that fills me with aha, wonder, perhaps light. I don't know if I'm always going to live in that space, but it sure is powerful and it keeps me going in this relationship. So the kingdom of God is within. Jesus taught us that. I think there's a similarity to the Buddhist piece of believing we all have Buddha nature within. Both of those say to me there's an invitation to slow down, to be still, to look within, to be silent, to be open to what shows up. Buddha lived in the 5th century before Christ in India. And as we know, he was a wealthy and beloved prince, and he had a wife and he had a daughter. and he discovered suffering outside of his castle. And he was drawn to go out into the world, not only to explore the suffering, but to find relief for it. Think what an empathic being he must have been to be so sensitive to that in others. And what passion he had, what a calling he had to change his life so critically. And let's pause for a moment and recognize what impact he and his teachings had in this world. And you might ask yourself in this moment, how have you been impacted by Buddhism? I know in my own life, I started to read about it in the 70s. I think there was a kind of wind coming from the east to the west with all kinds of poetry, Alan Watts and others, all kinds of mystery and invitation. So, what has been your relationship to Buddhism, if you've had one? There are three schools, three large schools of Buddhism. One is Zen Buddhism, and my teacher was Thich Nhat Hanh, and he was a Zen Buddhist from Vietnam. Another is the Theravada Buddhism, and then there's Tibetan Buddhism. Those are three great traditions. One of the things that's extremely important in Buddhism is the practice of the development of awareness. How important is awareness to you? And if you're willing, I invite you to just take a breath and notice what you're aware of. I'm aware of my body, of the chair on which I sit, of my breath, of a ringing in my ears. So there's a lot of sense awareness, which Unity addresses by calling it sense consciousness, with the awareness that sense can be pleasurable. It can teach us all kinds of things. Think about, how do senses play a role in your relationships? You see somebody, you hear somebody, you smell somebody, you touch somebody. You share food and taste with other people. Our senses ground us in this human experience. They're beautiful. They're wonderful. Buddha said so many things. One that's especially compelling, I think, is when he says, seek your true self. What does true self mean to us? Are our senses our true self? They're there. They're useful. We can navigate life with them. And is there something beyond our senses that is also our true self? And that's the invitation, to explore that, to find that, to cultivate that, to celebrate that, to even have relationship with ourself. And I'm using a capital letter S there, that will come out in Hinduism. So in this moment, let me invite you to ask yourself, what are you feeling about your relationship with all that is, with God, with the divine? Buddha was not an idol or a savior. I spoke last week about my beliefs around original sin, and that there isn't any, and therefore we do not need saving. And of course, I'm going to respect your opinion, whatever it is. But Buddha never said, oh, we need to be saved from being human. He said, there's more. There's more if you're willing to be open to it and look for it. So, in your own experiences, what more have you found? What more of your true self are you aware of in this moment? Crazy question. How do you celebrate that true self? Because it's a gift, isn't it? It's all a gift. The senses, the true self, the journey, the path, all of that is a gift. Relationship with each other, relationship with all that is, it's a gift. So, one of the things we talk about in unity is being fully human and fully divine. What does that mean for you right now? How can we be both things that seem contradictory at times? How can we expand enough to be both things and celebrate both of those as gifts? One of the ways that we do that in Buddhism, Hinduism, unity, and many faiths is to stop, to slow down, to be still, to be aware of what we are experiencing. And often there will be a sensation of expansion. Our awareness grows larger. We become aware of, oh, there's a window and a light and all that out there. Maybe we don't have to stop the expansion. Maybe we can just let it go as far as it wants to go. And that's part of our true self. In unity, one of the things that we really celebrate is our true self, including everything about us, is part of the one, part of the whole. There is no distancing, there is no separation from that which we might call God. How do we have a relationship with something when there's no separation? It's kind of a crazy question. How do we have a relationship with something so vast we can't even language it? I think one of the ways that we have that relationship is including our senses and then going into intuition, going into that ultimate knowing something without knowing how we know it. But we know it so well, we will defend it and have relationship with our own intuition and what gets revealed. And that requires trust, doesn't it? Trust in ourselves, trust in our intuition, trust in the process. One of the thoughts I just had is, as I'm looking at each of you, is there's also trust in our community. You know, you show up, I show up. I trust that we have something in common, that we have something we relish and we find precious, and that's our true selves. And sometimes I can see yours. You know, sometimes it's just a glimpse. Sometimes it's more enduring. And when we see each other's true self, what kind of relationship is that? To me, that seems almost the ultimate, you know, this relationship with God, with each other, with an awareness that it's all one. Think about that for a moment, if you will. It's all one. What does that mean? You know, my human monkey mind wants to go immediately to, oh, not always, or maybe not in this moment, maybe not at all. No, it really is. The monkey mind can get chattering. So in Buddhism, you may hear the phrase, take refuge. What does that mean? Again, Buddha recognized suffering and pain in life. Where and how do you take refuge? Can you take refuge in our community? Can you take refuge in your own beliefs and practices? Ultimately, can you take refuge in God and your true self? What does that feel like to take refuge? Think about the word. It just has a softness to it, refuge. So there are three jewels in Buddhism: the Dharma, which are the spiritual teachings, the Sangha, which is the spiritual community, and the Buddha, which is the spiritual awakening. And again, each of us has Buddha nature, just as each of us has Christ within. Whatever the language, whatever the name, there is something that calls to us. There is something that invites us, again, often to slow down, pay attention to that which we cannot sense with our five senses, and find it real, and keep coming back to it, because that's refuge, and refuge feels good. So in terms of Dharma, you might get curious about, what are the teachings you've experienced? When you were little, did you go somewhere where someone talked about faith, talked about God, talked about you, talked about relationship? Did you grow up and read things and listen to people and expand your understanding? Knowing you as I do, I think you probably have. So that's just a tiny bit about Buddhism. Again, it's a recognition that in this human life, there's pain. And that's so hard. And that there are ways of relieving ourselves of that pain. There are ways of putting that pain in perspective sometimes. What is your relationship in life to pain or suffering? You know, a lot of us want to just dismiss it. Whoop, not here, not here, going to deny it. But it may not go away. Sometimes we find meaning in that suffering. Sometimes we may find direction in that suffering. Like, oh, I'm going the wrong way. Let me change and go this way. Ooh, there's a little bit of relief of the suffering. What's your relationship with that? Where's the meaning or the purpose in it, if there is one? And how do we respond to that pain? I know sometimes how I will respond to my own is, all of a sudden I'm not part of the one because I'm so focused on that pain. Crazy thought. What if that pain is actually an invitation to come back to being the one? What if so much in life is an absolute invitation to come back to our true self, to come back to that which is glorious and divine, including within us? What if every morning when we wake up, there's a little invitation on our pillow rather than a piece of chocolate? A little invitation that says, this is a day. You have a day. What are you going to do with it? You know, this day is a gift. This breath is a gift. This life is a gift. Each relationship we have is a gift, even when there's conflict. And again, perhaps the ultimate gift is the relationship we have with God, or all that is. How often do we pause and celebrate that? I have shared before that I find that easiest to do in nature. There's just so much beauty and so much vibrancy and aliveness. We know everything is vibration and we respond to that. I think we also know we can shift our vibration with our thoughts, with our intentions, with our behaviors, etc. I think right now in our world, we are called, we are invited to do that. There's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of shadow, there's a lot going on that can be pretty intense and overwhelming. So what do we do to take care of ourselves and yet still be informed if we think that's important? What are we called to do right now? I think at a minimum, what would be helpful is to keep focusing, to keep coming back to true self, to keep coming back to taking refuge, to keep coming back to offering refuge to others. And part of that, I believe, is being aware of how we are vibrating, how much light we are allowing to move through us, to shine through us, to be shared through us. It's so important that we remember we are not in this life alone, that everything we do, every thought we have, everything impacts another. And sometimes I know I'm real clumsy with that. Put my shutters on, don't see somebody, whatever, or say something that I don't mean to be so callous. But there are other times that I can choose to be kind, to pay attention. And I don't always know how that little moment of kindness might help provide refuge for another. What I know is that every time I experience kindness from another, that is refuge for me. So I want to offer that back when I can. These are not little things, I don't believe. I think these can be momentous things, especially the more of us that participate in the intention of making our world lighter, better, vibrating higher in the best way we can. And that brings up the question of what is our relationship to this world? There are certainly times where I look at the news of the world and I go, ooh, I'm retreating. That's okay. Especially if I'm willing to come back out, right? We do need to take care of ourselves. And one of the ways that we do that is to develop practices or disciplines. Every faith has their practices, their disciplines. Buddhism draws on meditation quite a bit. We do that in unity also. In unity, we also draw on prayer. I invite you in this moment to ask yourself, what is your relationship with meditation or being still and paying attention? What is your relationship with prayer? How do those practices serve you? And when we're drawing on those practices, how might they serve someone else? We've probably all had the experience of going into a meditation from a place of frenzy and then finding ourselves settling down, calming down. Isn't that a gift? Isn't there some meaning in that? Isn't it something that can be shared with others? So I invite you in this moment to just ask yourself, what are your practices? Maybe there's a simple one like taking a walk, picking flowers and arranging flowers, playing music, listening to music, dancing, creating art, being kind to animals. These are all important practices. What are your practices? Are there any new practices you'd like to add without it being onerous? With it just being an invitation. I invite you in this moment to become aware of what is probably a deep desire within each of us to be a part of the whole, to be a part of the one. We like belonging. It's essential as humans that we belong. None of us do well in isolation, and yet it can be seductive. So when we find ourselves spiraling into that, what can we draw on? What practice can we count on that will help us come back to the world? Because ultimately, I really want you to hear this. The world needs you. The world needs each of us. And we might not know exactly what it needs from us, but we are here and alive. We are here and alive. And we have so many choices. One of the things I think we can do as a community is support each other in those choices. We don't even have to use language. When we see each other, let's just light up. It's so good to see you. It's so good to recognize you. It's so good to know that we are all part of that one. And the evidence is when I see you, right? So these are just a few thoughts that I've had, and I'm going to do a little series on our relationship to God over the next couple of weeks, looking next week at Hinduism and then other faiths. Because again, one of the things I love about unity is we respect all faiths. We recognize they have a place, they serve a purpose. And historically, we have taken bits and pieces from many different faiths and put it together in a package. We've done that pretty well. So again, I invite each of us to take a breath. If you're willing, if you're able, to be aware in this moment of the divinity within you, the divinity within each of us. Some kind of sparkle, some kind of light, some kind of fire, whatever it is, it's there. And so it is. We will hear from Christina.
Thank you, Dava. That was great.
Christina, thank you. Thank you so much. Each week since when the pandemic started and we got onto Zoom, we have done something we're calling our donation of love and light. And that is a recognition of that's our true self, this love, this light that is within us. And we take a couple of breaths and we focus on it within us and just observe it. And it typically expands and is shared. So I invite us to do that by taking a couple of breaths. Being aware of this love, this light, aware of its value to us, aware of its preciousness. We often notice as we share it, as it expands, there is no loss for us. It doesn't diminish in any way. It keeps growing because it's part of the whole. And we might be thoughtful through our day to day of what is our relationship with this love and light? And maybe a more direct question is, how am I this love and light? And isn't that a miracle? And we take a breath, and we say, thank you. And so it is. And we will hear from Christina again. Thank you.
What do you think, Hester? What shall we do?